Hi, everyone, and welcome to one more webinar in our series, Capstone and Design Thinkers Academy Singapore series. I'm really delighted to be able to have you on board one more time. I'm going to, at this point, take you through a couple of slides to be able to introduce the collaboration we have with Design Thinkers Academy Singapore. I have with me here today a very, very erudite set of speakers on the panel. I will introduce them in just a minute, but suffice to say, I want to be able to welcome all of you on board, even as I start the presentation for all of you. So welcome Richard Reiki, and welcome Ashish Basin, welcome Daryl Lim of Design Thinkers Academy Singapore. I'm going to introduce all of you in just a bit. I wanted to take a couple of minutes to be able to get the housekeeping out of the way, and also to be able to introduce this collaboration to everyone who is on board and joining us for the first time. So for those of you who are joining for the first time, I'm Dr. Sujaya Banerjee, and I'm the founder, CEO of Capstone Consulting. We've had the absolute privilege and pleasure of collaborating with Design Thinkers Academy earlier this year in June this year. And for those of you who did attend the absolutely wonderful knowledge sessions we had when we announced the collaboration, we did say that we would keep up with the knowledge sessions, and we've done that. And I want to thank those of you joining us again for an absolutely splendid support and feedback, which kind of inspires us and keeps us going to be able to do more. So this time we talk about the power of co-creation, and I'm going to, before we come to that, tell you a bit about us so that you have a context on Capstone People Consulting and also on Design Thinkers Academy. So our collaboration, was announced in June this year, and this gives us the opportunity to bring in the very outstanding Design Thinkers Academy to India, and their thought leadership and their absolutely outstanding work that they do across 28 countries in the world, so that we're able to bring the benefit of this, and especially on the back of the very unprecedented times that we're existing in at this point, and the kind of turbulence that we've been experiencing, and the disruption that most organizations have experienced. I don't think after this anyone's ever going to ask what is VUCA. I mean, I teach leadership, and I would sometimes have people, especially who are tenured over extended periods of time working for the same organization, often asking that it seems like BAU, business as usual. So where is the real VUCA? I don't think anyone's asking that anymore. So, we've all kind of, I think, amply understood what is VUCA in the context of what we've all experienced collectively. And while these are very challenging times and very difficult times, this is a black swan event. What we have around us is actually history unfolding around us. These are the kind of stories and tales we're going to tell generations to come. And for everyone who's experiencing this early in their lifetime, I mean, they're learning the best life lessons so early in the game. So we launched this in the context of being able to bring new thinking, authenticity to decision making. We thought this kind of and I think Daryl kind of echoes that at their end as well. We really thought we kind of synergistically completed each other. The Design Thinkers Academy wanted to be able to work with people who work in the space of leadership and change. And we were looking to be able to work to bring design thinking and the power of design thinking and creating new solutions, especially in adversity, to organizations. So this has been a very, very strong synergistic kind of association, and it's very mutually beneficial. And even if we formed it in the lockdown, we're hoping to be able to make a huge difference as Capstone finds a presence in Singapore and Design Thinkers Academy finds a presence in India. Move forward. I promise to take only a few minutes with this because I know you've joined to be able to know more about co-creation. So we'll come to that in only a bit. Capstone's a very vibrant startup. We started about 3 years ago. We do work in the space of leadership and change. We do work in the space of design thinking. We do work in the space of diversity and inclusion. We have a very strong advisory practice around talent and building leadership pipelines of the future, where we advise a lot of organizations. We work now with over 70 leading MNCs and with large Indian organizations. And I must say that, this job's just gotten even more exciting in the last couple of months with what we're seeing clients come to us with. And and the very, very interesting and challenging times to be able to really put our minds to being able to find meaningful solutions, leadership solutions. And I think we're really enjoying ourselves with that because, like I said, it is a great opportunity. It's a black swan event, all right, but it's a great opportunity. So move forward. I want to tell you about Design Thinkers Academy, and this is again a very outstanding organization. It's the world's leading design-driven innovation agency, making transition from being strictly product-oriented and sales-driven towards being service-oriented and human-centered is how they actually influence their clients and organizations. Design Thinkers Academy is a global education. It exists across 28 countries, and it trains, develops, facilitates creative, multidisciplinary teams and communities to be able to drive positive change. I can tell you that with the work that we're doing along with them, they've already begun influencing us very positively indeed, and we're waiting to be able to do more together with them, like Daryl says, in the region, really. So we're not just looking at Singapore and India, we're looking at Asia as a region, and we want to be able to make a difference to Asia. Move forward. So through this collaboration, we're looking to be able to work with organizations that are looking to rethink, reinvent, relaunch, both strategically and tactically. And we want to be able to bring the expertise of both to both countries. And that's how we've taken this partnership forward, move forward. Even if I take you through a snapshot of some of the kind of offerings and work, suffice to say that we work with organizations. While there are programs and there are certifications and all of that, and we welcome, large numbers of people to be able to come in and get hold of this. But this is very significantly available, and we're very confident. We come from a space of expertise. We have all of this. But I think the largest expertise we've been bringing to organizations is by working with them through real problems. And so working with intact teams to be able to apply the principles of design thinking, looking at leadership that can apply the principles of design thinking is what we really revel in, and we do a great job with it. So, but these are some of the offerings that we do together with Design Thinkers Academy. Move forward. And with that, I'm really excited to bring you one more knowledge series from the stable of Capstone and Design Thinkers Academy. And like I said, we have a very erudite panel joining us in this conversation today. And most importantly, the topic, which is, the power of co-creation in the new economy. I think this is just such a powerful theme given where we're poised right now. And, with Richard, with the kind of rich experience Richard brings in and the kind of media icon that Ashish Basina is, we couldn't think, Daryl and I were very excited when both of them accepted to be able to come in and speak. I'll take you a bit to the sort of backgrounds of both of them, and Richard and Ashish, give me and Daryl only a couple of minutes to be able to draw you into the conversation. Now, some housekeeping before we get started. So our conversations, our webinars are learning conversations. So the format is learning conversations. So it's a freewheeling dialogue between us and the experts that we invite to these conversations. So you'll see a lot of that happening, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. But the best way to enjoy this is to share your opinions and your views. You're all very experienced. You have your own point of view on a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So do post that using the chat box. So we're going to constantly keep looking for your participation through the chat box. Use the question icon at the bottom to be able to also post your questions, and you may want to direct them to specific panelists, in which case we'll be happy to do that. Periodically, we have audience poll questions planned for you here today. So do participate in that so that we're able to get your point of view as we're going along. Right? And I hope you have a nice hot beverage with you, because this is going to be almost 90 minutes. We will take questions at the end if we haven't yet addressed it during the course of our conversation. So with that, let me introduce you to our two very outstanding speakers today. Move forward. Richard Reiki, he's consultant and non-executive board member with KPMG. He's presently a board member with KPMG Dubai. He's been a chief executive officer of KPMG in India, and he's now a member of the Council of KPMG International. Over 37 years of experience in consulting, and he's also worked with Arthur Andersen, Ernst & Young before he joined KPMG. He really comes with real-time, extensive experience coupled with his experience with corporate governance, enterprise risk management, process re-engineering, and the rest that he actually brings to the table. Driven by a higher purpose, Richard chooses to be a servant leader, which is right at the center of the human-centric leadership that is so required in these times. It would be fabulous to hear more from him about that. And he also calls for a new direction of leading from the heart. So, Richard, I must say that, we're already on the same page, because this is very much what we're propagating through our association with Design Thinkers Academy. Move forward, and I'll introduce you to Ashish Bhasin, who's also been a peer and a dear friend. We both worked together during our time with Lintas, and he spent the most defining time of his career with Low Lintas and Partners, which is now, of course, undergone a couple of changes in terms of its name. It's been Lintas for most people, and I think that Ashish kind of embodies the excellence of Lintas in many ways. He's been part of the media and advertising world for a very long time. He's currently the CEO, Asia Pacific, and also the chairman India of Dentsu Aegis Network, Asia Pacific. He is frequently featured in the press, whether Economic Times or otherwise. So I'm very sure many of you already know of him. He has represented India as a jury member at the Cannes. He's also been he's been to the US as part of an exclusive Rotary program. And he was recently promoted to be the CEO for the Asia Pac region. So congratulations, Ashish, for that. But Ashish comes with my quintessence of Ashish's undiluted entrepreneurship, and he's very, very naturally innovative. So we couldn't have got a better person to be able to come in and join this conversation. So both of you, Richard and Ashish, welcome. This has been fantastic, and thank you for accepting to be part of this conversation here today. I know many people are going to benefit from this, especially because we're also relaying it on YouTube, and I'm hoping that this becomes available to more people, even those who could not attend today. Do find this webinar available to you on YouTube. So I think with that, I think Rupali, you can stop the sharing of the deck, and I think we can perhaps have a conversation here together. Everyone, please do, like I said, actively use the chat box so that we can make this more exciting. So I'm going to start at the start, and Daryl, feel free to be able to add as I go along. I didn't introduce Daryl to those who are joining for the first time. He's so much my partner in crime, so I've kind of missed calling out what Daryl's really done. Daryl's a fabulous. He's been in teaching, he's been in consulting. Daryl runs the Design Thinkers Academy in Singapore. I dare say it's only Singapore because it's actually all of Asia Pac. And I've met a lot of people through the network already, and each one is a gem. So I must say they're doing fabulous work in the region. Very creative, very ingenious, very human-centric. They embody everything that they teach people. So I must say it's great to be able to have, Daryl on board. So Daryl and I will both facilitate this together. So Daryl, feel free to be able to speak after I do. So yes, I think I want to be able to start this conversation by being able to talk about the power of the term co-creation. And I want to call out that it's not a new term. C.K. Prahlad spoke about it so many years ago. And at that time, what he was trying to drive is that, your customer has many options and, to go to, whether in products or services. So what is indeed your differentiator? And, for so long as you make firm-based decisions, which is, unilateral, you kind of lose a very significant part of the conversation. And you could actually become more innovative. You could become more you can redefine standards, you can redefine excellence, you can redefine innovation if you involve the other voice. Now, notwithstanding that there's been lots of hesitation for organizations to actually put this into action, because it's one thing to say it sounds so sexy to co-create something, and it's another to actually put that into action. And I think the reason why we picked this theme up again, is because even if C.K. Prahlad brought this up so many years ago, this now has another flavor altogether in the current very disruptive times. And we're now looking at co-creation in the context of coming closest to the customer, especially in times where we're vulnerable. Most organizations find themselves with their back against the wall. They know, even if they don't express it, that they don't have answers to many questions. And that if they want to be able to come back, reinvent, rejuvenate, research, then there's something that they don't know inside the organization, despite the fact that most marketers believe that the customers don't know their own minds. So there is something there which is residing outside the organization that is calling out and crying out loud for co-creation. My own background's been in talent and HR and leadership development for over 30 years. And I work and consult many organizations. And I must say that, co-creation sits right at the center of the kind of collaboration you're expecting in these times. And here I'm trying to bring in the talent perspective to be able to say that there are huge opportunities to be able to integrate talent through co-creation processes and to solve problems that impact talent through a co-creation mechanism. And I must say that while there are in pockets attempts to be able to distribute leadership, by and large, there seems to be a challenge in terms of being able to actually bring this into action to solve real-time problems. So I think with that, I want to be able to, hand over to Daryl for your views on this.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Sujaya. Well, that was, thank you for the introduction as well. You have really been a very fantastic partner with us, with Design Thinkers Academy, and you've really been advocating a lot of design thinking across India and with us as well, online and offline. Coming to this topic in particular of co-creation, like you said, it's one thing to talk about co-creation, is really another thing to really do it. And I personally feel that this is the time. In fact, we have never been given such a time for us to really identify talents, because after all, in the search for talents, we are really looking for people who know how to deal with the other people. We're not really looking for talents to be able to deal with machines, to be able to find the errors in the machines, but we're really looking for talents that are able to lead a big group of people into new successes. And I think this topic is very apt during this time, and more apt because two of our experts here are able to really share with us some of the ways where they had really also pivoted their organizations. I'm really looking forward to that. So thank you very much, Dr. Sujaya, for inviting me to join you in doing this.
Okay, I think it's time to bring in both our panelists. So I'm going to really start with the very first question to both of you, and I want to know from you, how you see these disruptive times as an opportunity for co-creation. So, what are your views on co-creation, given the way in which organizations are poised at this time to do with both customers and talent? So, I'll invite Richard to go first.
Thank you, Sujaya. It is really a privilege to be here. And thank you for inviting me. And the topic is absolutely timely. There could not be a better time to talk of co-creation. Co-creation has been going on for ages, but I think it is now that it's picked up steam post-COVID. And I think a lot of companies are now pivoting their entire business model onto co-creation. In fact, what I found surprising was that you're finding competitors coming together now. You would never think that two competitors would ever come together to co-create something, because each of them have their relevant strengths. So I think what companies have done, so what is co-creation is when two people actually come together. It could be customers, it could be vendors, it could be employees, competitors in this case, design thinkers, experts, anybody. Everybody comes together to think together what the solution is. We got a problem facing us. How do we find a solution to actually solve that problem? But I think the most important thing when we co-create, I think, is trust. And if there is trust, which is there, I think you spoke of the word vulnerability, because companies are vulnerable. But I think to even co-create, companies need to get rid of that vulnerability, because you're getting exposed now, because now your weaknesses are coming out. So you need to listen to what your customer wants. I mean, there's no more better time than to listen to what your customer wants, because you are creating a product for the customer, and customer centricity is the most important. And, while we are talking of co-creation, while a number of companies, there are a huge number of examples from IKEA to Unilever to P&G to you name the company, DHL, they've all co-created, Lego. I think it's time for governments to also co-create. The one thing that surprised me in this entire COVID was the globe didn't come together. Governments did not come together. Even the governments within countries did not involve their people to find solutions to the problems. Yeah. So this would have been a great area of co-creation, actually, because there's a lot of talent sitting here. The citizens would have come forward, because it's a problem we're all facing. So I think the government could have played a better role. Maybe they have learned and they will come out, but one did not find that. Because, when you're co-creating, you're actually leaving your comfort zone. and you're entering into a partnership with people you may not know at that point of time. And I think the qualities that are required is agility, the ability to trust people, to collaborate, and then to come and give your own thoughts, and to get over your fear. Because earlier, before this this subject, this webinar started, we were discussing about how do actually people get out from their centralized kind of power. What I'm finding is the power paradigm is now moving away to a co-create paradigm. So the power paradigm which people used to revel in, that we are powerful, yes, it will be there for some more time. I mean, today the leaders, you can see how they behave. But I think that is crumbling, and co-creation is going to be the order of the day, and we're going to see that taking over the world. So I think co-creation is here to stay. Many of the examples that we will discuss over this webinar will be now beyond COVID. So it is just not to solve the COVID problem. It is actually solving a futuristic problem. And I mean, I just give you one example to work from home. I mean, I remember many years back when I was running, a few years back when I was running KPMG in India, I said we should work from anywhere. Why do we have to come to office to work? And people laughed at me because they said, what is this guy talking? And now work from home has become a reality. And I think now people don't want to go anywhere else. I mean, many people, okay, some people want it. They want to work because they found productivity, they found less stressful environment, they found a better work-life balance. Hopefully, some people are cribbing; they are working longer hours now. But it has its pluses and minuses. So I think the advantage is that crisis always throws up opportunities for forward-looking companies, and I think new leaders emerge. We are seeing. I'll just give you one example of Airbnb. Airbnb, we all know, was a place where you go and book a room and you get a great place to stay, etc. Their model crashed because that model didn't work. Nobody was going and staying in hotels or whatever. So they went for online virtual experiences. They brought online virtual experiences. All the rooms, that inventory they had, they provided it to, a lot of it they provided to healthcare frontline workers to use at a very differentiated price. Third, what they did, they brought these, long stay, 1 month stay vacation kind of, where people could go and be in a safe environment out. So I'm just saying how business, I'm just giving one example to say how business model pivoted. And I was listening to the founder, and he was saying that when this idea first came to me, he laughed at it. Virtual vacation, virtual online, who would want to do it? But he said it just picked up, and now it has become, and he's going to continue with it. They've already seen the benefits of it. So I think I'll stop here, Sujaya, for the timing, and so that we can carry on with the discussion here.
Yeah, no, I think that you brought up some really relevant points. I just wanted to react to the one, because I know that you've done extensive work with the government, Richard. So, I actually came across a citizens group kind of reference in one of the, sort of something that I was reading.
Sure.
Talked about, the citizens group in the UK asking why the government had not co-created solutions by asking past governments that may have experienced some form of a pandemic or the other. And that these are times where you go beyond which government you belong to, I mean, which party you belong to. And that, you're looking for, and you're so right, I think it was starkly absent, in our country in terms of really, various groups of people coming together to be able to find solutions. And I think that you see that starkly inside organizations as well, which is even while we are singing hosannas to co-creation, that there's such significant stumbling blocks. I want to move over to Ashish, but before that, I thought maybe we can take, maybe an audience poll at this time. So, Sunit, can you help me with the audience poll? I want to bring in the audience. We want to see more of your comments and your views in the on the chat box. But before we come to that, let's get started with an audience poll. We'll get you activated so we can bring you in, right?
Sure. Before you do that, Dr. Sujaya, actually, I wanted to also talk about, Richard brought up this very interesting point about the shifting of the power paradigm into the co-creation paradigm. I really like that, because I think we have all been built around this whole power paradigm where we learned from our education system the power of knowledge, the power of management, the power of control, the power of everything. But now you are into that that no new era of losing control, being vulnerable. It's really something that I hope maybe shortly after this we should discuss. How are people coping? Really, how are people coping with this whole shift of the paradigms? But in the meantime, please go ahead. Let's do the poll
All right.
first.
Okay. All right. Suneet, can we have the poll up, please? All right. So this is your first question in the audience poll. Do you believe centralized decision making in most companies does not allow for co-creating solutions as it involves sharing power with employees and customers? So this is on the back of Daryl's comment on power. So
Perfect.
we timed it perfectly well. So centralized decision making in most companies do not allow for co-creating solution as it involves sharing power with employees and customers. So give us your response, simple yes or no. And so if it's mostly yes, then it's a yes. And if it's mostly no, then there's a no. We have no range there, just simply yes or no. Um, take 30 seconds to be able to respond, everyone. And we'll try and get, Suneet, can you publish this? Okay, so you have a staggering 93%. Yeah, this is a problem with not wanting to share power, notwithstanding that you may get a much better solution than what you set out to get. So I think this is the ideal time to be able to bring in, Ashish Basin. So Ashish, I'm going to ask you, what is your reaction to what you're seeing here on this audience poll?
Look, I think the reaction is on absolutely expected lines. I think the biggest enemy of co-creation are two. One is lack of agility, because for co-creating you need to be extremely agile, and the other is insecurity and ego. Even corporates have ego, right? So I don't ever want to confess that me as an organization cannot do it all by myself. I need help from somebody else. That makes me insecure. That makes me feel vulnerable. The word which was just used. So I think this does reflect reality to that extent. But this is going to change extremely rapidly, and in some ways, COVID is probably going to be kind of a catalyst or a trigger.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because one thing that COVID has done, I mean, something that Richard was also referring to, geography is now history, right? It doesn't matter where you are based.
Yeah.
So therefore, even for talent, really doesn't matter where you're now based. In my industry, for example, our biggest constraint and our biggest opportunity and our biggest threat is talent, the quality of talent, right? So far, for the 33 years that I've been in this business, you've typically constrained yourself by the talent that is available in and around the geographical area where you're based. So if I've got a client in Bombay, then I would like somebody in Bombay to be servicing it, and so on and so forth, right? So therefore we've been brought up with a certain type of a mindset.
Yeah.
All of a sudden now that is out of the window.
Yeah.
If I could find a damn good person in Manchester, I can make that happen as much as I can from Mumbai, simply because it really doesn't matter where that person is based. So I think this will act as a good catalyst in this bit. The second thing is that nothing teaches us more than adversity, and like they say, necessity is the mother of all inventions. Every company, almost every company, is certainly going to be facing difficult times at the moment, right? Money is going to be in short supply, as in demand is dried up, and therefore revenues are dried up, and so on and so forth. So there is going to be a huge thrust for efficiency in a positive sense, not necessarily in a negative sense. Of course, that also leads to loss of jobs, etc. All of that, we know the bad parts of it, but the advantage of efficiency coming in is that it's better for the ecosystem in the longer run. Now, once that efficiency is there, again, it really then doesn't matter where the idea is originating from, who is playing what role. Whatever is the most efficient, most agile way of doing it is what is going to result, what is going to finally flow through in that, right? And last but not the least, I feel that companies of the future who are going to be successful, and we've already seen it in the era of digital companies, which are digital giants, Facebooks, Googles, Amazons of the world, which have proven this. I think the companies that are going to be most successful are companies that are going to be able to grow entrepreneurs. We're always looking at entrepreneurs and get very fascinated by it, and then want to pay millions of dollars to buy out their companies. But we don't realize that almost every employee within the company has the potential of becoming an entrepreneur, and therefore in that sense co-creating along with the company, provided he or she also has an upside in that process. So this can trigger off a complete new era of looking at even employee employer relationship in that sense. For this to happen, there has to be agility by definition. Like entrepreneurs have to be quick decision makers, so entrepreneurs have to do that as well. Centralized thinking for large global companies is extremely important. I'm not denying that. There needs to be a certain framework, otherwise you'll be disjointed on that. And when a customer is your global customer, whether he's seeing you in New York or he's seeing you in New Delhi, he wants to see or she wants to see a very similar response, or at least in the same direction. So there's no doubt that there needs to be a framework with which particularly large companies will have to operate, but they will have to learn to get more agile, more trusting, empower their employees a lot more, and a lot more will have to start happening on the local, at the local level, because that's where the action is now going to be. You no longer have the luxury of time that let's get the feedback from here, then we'll send it to our regional office, which will then send it to head office, which will then cascade it back, etc., etc. So therefore, I'm not surprised to see a 90% plus people saying, giving that vote from my point of view.
Right. I'm going to hear, if Daryl doesn't have something to add here, I'm just going to move over to Richard. I think Ashish has brought up some very significant pointers, and I cannot agree more with most of what he's saying here. Richard, is there and I'm doing this in the interest of, we've all spoken about the value of co-creation. We're talking about it's a challenge to be able to take this off the ground. I think it's time for us to be able to start talking about instances of co-creation or examples of co-creation, so people understand, the audience can be on the same page on what do we really mean, or what are we talking about when we're talking about co-creation. So is there an instance you have, and if it's a COVID time in sort of example, it perhaps be more relatable for the audience. Is there an instance you can bring forth on co-creation and how co-creation really worked, whether it was with talent or whether it was in the context of customer?
Okay, I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. The first example is this entire work from home thing, which is there. And as consultants, honestly, we're always co-creating. Consultants by nature co-create with their clients solutions, whether it is a cost reduction or an opportunity to grow, etc. So we have been co-creating right through our lives in many ways. But the one example that I want to give in is I have recently been involved with a company which was into speakers, getting these big high-level speakers to come and speak on their platform, which was a very offline platform. Now they have moved on to online, and they become an L&D company in vernacular language. So I mean, to pivot from having the Sashi Tharoors and the Moktik Singh Ahluwalias come and speak on your platform to create a learning module for the masses. I mean, the people out there, and these are soft skills, and because they collected a lot of content, and they have got content in vernacular language also, and they've been able to go and do it. So this has been a model which got pivoted in about a month or 2 months. It moved from an offline to an online, and then online into L&D. So how far and how successful it's going to be, time will only tell, but they've had the courage to take that step and move forward on it. So this is happening as we talk. And so I think, and then the other one which I've seen is, which I can give you, this is not my own example, but it's an example of IKEA, which understood the problem of urban living. And they found that as the population is growing, the not so rich people, they need comfortable, sustainable, environment-friendly homes. So they have gone into what they call the co-living kind of space, in which they have, they don't call it co-living, there's a terminology which they use, which is basically the future of urban living, which IKEA exposes, because they want to be environmental friendly. So they've created housing which is going to be affordable. The entire philosophy to life is to provide furniture across the spectrum, from the not so affordable to the richer people. So I think so this is one example of a company which has gone into a problem. This is not a COVID one, by the way,
Yeah.
but this is a problem which is solving. You're wanting specific COVID problems. I'll have to think through, and I'll come with an answer to you at the moment. Let me just think through a few, and I'll
Sure,
come back.
sure. Ashish, anything that you can share as an instance of co-creation and co-creating solutions, with employees or co-creating solutions with customers?
I think the best example from my industry I can share is the entire content production. So if you know, in this COVID period, everything had stopped in India. There were no shooting allowed. You couldn't get out of your home. Very severe lockdown, no editing, no stars, no nothing, right? But at the same time, you do need to have, let's say, an ad made or some content made for that. I mean, television channels were running out of content, advertisers were running out of ads which would make, and you saw several examples, and I don't want to necessarily give those from my agency to make it sound that, I mean, Facebook is one example which our agency had done, where people sitting in their houses, often using iPhones because you didn't even have equipment, actually created great storylines which were then weaved together. And I would say very good level of advertising was created, which was then disseminated on television channels or digital or wherever you're doing it. So again, an example of where nobody, I mean, I could never have imagined 6 months ago that people sitting at home will be able to make ads, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a good example of how you can. But leading from here also comes another scary thought. And if you're a co-creator, you have to be ready for disruption, because you are a disruptor, and therefore you will also get disrupted. Now, we are used to making commercials worth 3 crores, 4 crores, let's say $500,000, $1 million, etc., in that range, right? Big commercials and so on. All of a sudden, we realize we can make reasonably good commercials, maybe for $10,000 or $50,000 or something. Now, that in itself has the potential, on the one hand, to completely disrupt an industry. So if you're getting something for $500,000 and you're suddenly getting it for $50,000, obviously it totally disrupts it. On the other hand, it has the potential of bringing in huge amount of efficiencies. Something that was worth $500,000 can now happen in $50,000, and therefore maybe spawning a complete new industry in that area. So co-creation or disruption or any new steps that you take also bring the excitement and adrenaline of disruption, and therefore it is not for the faint-hearted, is a concept I'd like to throw in.
Right, right, absolutely. I want to stay with that with you, Ashish, because your industry is so significantly disrupted even before we experienced COVID in the last couple of months. I want you to tell me a little more about this whole transition that your industry has been compelled to make into the digital space, and what has this meant for people inside this industry in terms of going up steep learning curves on the technology front. I just want to get into a bit more of nitty-gritties on how do you pivot. Like, even if you do, and we talk about pivoting, we're saying old playbooks don't work, but I think your industry is kind of throbbingly living example of how you've actually worked around this disruption and become, sort of digital, marketing and digital media platform. So tell us a bit about that pivot and what has that really meant for the industry. I mean, you're a great spokesperson for the media and entertainment industry. So tell us a bit about that. I know the entertainment piece has transitioned largely to OTT and the rest of that, but talk a bit about the whole digital space and how that pivot is being managed inside your organization.
So let me tell you a story, and I'll tell you my story. And the good thing about telling a story is that you tell it post the event, therefore you can make yourself look smarter than what you actually were. So I brought in what was then Aegis Media before the Dentsu acquisition into India in 2008. And my competitors had been in this market for 80 plus years before me and were pretty dominant. So WPP and IPG had been number 1 and 2 in this market for more than 80 years, right? So now I was coming in 80 years later. There was no way I could have I had 40, 50 people while they had, let's say, 2,000 or 3,000 people or whatever. That was a scale difference, right? There was no way I was going to be able to take them head on in that area unless I caused some disruption or unless I rode upon a disruption which is happening. And I was really wondering what to do. And to make matters worse, I brought this company in and I joined in June of 2008. And a few months after that, Lehman Brothers happened. So it couldn't have been a worse timing in a sense, but in hindsight, it probably proved to be the best timing from that sense, because you need an external input sometimes to make disruption happen. So having said that, one day I was just wondering, therefore, now how do I get off this? I've got 40, 50 people. What do I do? And I went through one of these in our industry. We have Sam Balsara, a good friend of mine who runs Madison. He runs this bit of, how has the year gone by been? So how has television done? How has print done? How has cinema done, outdoor done, etc. And he made this presentation. I was listening to that, beautifully presented, and he spoke about cinema, he spoke about print and how TV was growing, and he spoke about all the medium. And then he said, and then there's also digital, which is about 3% of the market, 3 or 4% of the market. That was right. It was 3 or 4% of the market. And that's where the penny dropped to me. I said that, look, herein lies my opportunity. Rest of the world, I know digital is growing pretty rapidly. I can see it all around me. My children, I mean, they're living a digital life. They're digital natives. They're going to become the consumers of tomorrow. And my competition is completely ignoring it because it's only 3 or 4%, because all of them were making tons and tons of money on traditional media. And therefore, when you're making a lot of money and everything is going well, you don't want to see beyond that, right? So I said that I will make a digitally led company, a digitally first company or whatever. Of course, somewhere down the and at that time the market was only 2 or 3%. Last year the market was about 20%. Um, our company, my company in India, gets almost 50% of its revenues from digital, and that has really helped us, particularly in these COVID times. We are relatively less disrupted than others are, and what it also did was it helped me change the ranking in the, which had 1 and 2, like I said, for 88 years hadn't changed. We became the second largest marketing and communication group in India. And from 50 people, we grew to 3,500 people, largely because we backed this disruption in the digital era, which you could actually see it coming. But, when you're making lots of money in areas outside of that, it doesn't stare at you. But when you have nothing and you're hungry, then you keep looking out for it, and that's what happens. So I think that's a great example of how the disruption happens and co-creation happens. Now, also, if I were to actually have become a digital expert, it would have taken me 20 years to get anywhere, right? So that's where co-creation comes. We found partnerships, we did acquisitions, and acquisitions in a manner that we gave stake to the people that we acquired in the success of the larger company, and brought them all under one P&L, one group. Because what I didn't want was to make a company which is siloed into 25 parts, right? So the co-creators in this, so we've got the best person in performance marketing, search and performance marketing, brought him and his company into our group. We got the best social media company, brought them into our group, and then got this orchestra to work together. And I think that team and that co-creation of sorts actually helped us get here. So I am, as you can imagine, a big fan of this.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to just take that thought forward to say that, your industry particularly needs to cater to both India and to Bharat. Does that involve co-creation as well in terms of the content or the way you're going to speak to them? Your target groups that you're talking to are so different. So I'm just saying, what is the degree of co-creation there in terms of being appealing, in terms of what you put out to both India and to Bharat?
Look, in India, the opportunity is much bigger in Bharat than it is in India. I mean, using your analogy, at least for the foreseeable future, more so now, because the rural economy is less disrupted than the urban economy is. We are still very agriculture dependent. Only 15-16% of our GDP actually comes from agriculture, but 55 to 60% of people are directly or indirectly dependent upon rural incomes or rural bits. So also in metros, for most categories, there's already severe saturation penetration. So, I mean, toothpaste would probably have 98% penetration in Bombay or Delhi or whatever, but there's a big scope for growth for almost everything in tier 3, tier 4 towns and in rural markets. And therefore, there is a huge opportunity for most brands there, right? That will also mean that communication will become more regional, more local. That will also mean media will change accordingly, because if I'm sitting in Meerut, I'm more interested in figuring out what's the news in my district. Then I'll be worried about what's happening in Bombay, and then I'll be worried about what's happening in the rest of the world. So that's causing a complete change. Of course, the big leveler in this is mobile, because through mobile, the whole communication, the whole knowledge gathering, the whole entertainment now with OTTs, etc., has completely changed. So there are the one mistake, however, that you have to avoid, which for many years advertisers have been making, is that you tend to think the general thought used to be that the rural consumer is less smart and therefore you dumb down your communication. It's actually the other way around. The rural consumer is smarter than the urban consumer. You know, I'll give you an example. When I used to work on Hindustan Lever products, I bet you nobody knows. You will never know what it costs you to have a bath, right? You at best you will know. Okay, my soap costs 35 rupees. That also, if you know, probably you won't know, and then you'll never know how many baths you can get out of one soap, and therefore what one soap will cost you, right? The rural consumer, because particularly in those days money used to be, actual cash used to be so short, actually knows what's the cost per bath of a soap, because for them it's a big investment even to put 10 rupees or something in a soap, right? Which is why the whole sachet revolution, which is why the whole economy, economy brands that came up and local brands that came up and so on. So when you're communicating to Bharat, the content has to be relevant to them, but it does not have to be dumbed down. The youth in a small village has the same aspirations as a youth in Singapore, watches the same TV shows as a girl in Bombay does, or listens to the same music as a child in New York or London does today, right? So they have global aspirations. They have access now through mobile to all of that, are very smart, but their needs are very different. Their purchasing abilities are very different, and therefore the same solution cannot work for both.
Right. So just out of curiosity, did you find out how many baths you can get out of a soap?
Well, I learned it the hard way, because I had gone with a recommendation of launching a larger soap size, right?
Oh, okay.
Because a larger soap size is actually cheaper for the consumer, because the company saves on packaging and so on. So the bigger pack is actually cheaper on a per gram basis, right? But it completely flopped, because it's not about how many baths you're getting out of that soap. It's about how many rupees you have in your pocket to be, once it's outpriced over a certain threshold, the consumer then does not have the wherewithal to go out and buy it. So what, in theory, to somebody sitting in South Bombay sounds like a brilliant idea on your Excel sheet, actually when you get down to Ichal Karanji and are doing your, spending your time with the villages, you realize how out of sync you are in reality. So the one thing that it taught me, there used to be this gentleman called Shunu Sen, who was like a legend. He was a marketing head of Hindustan Lever when I had joined as a young trainee, and I was put on a brand called Wheel. Wheel was a challenger to Nirma. Nirma had come in and completely started eroding Surf and Rin, which was then the, let's say, the mainstay of detergents in Hindustan Lever at that time. So then Nirma had come in, and then we launched Wheel powder to counter that. It was called Project Sting, Strategy to Inhibit Nirma's Growth. A very hush-hush product. He did one thing which I hated him for at that time and blessed him all my life thereafter. He said, "You're not going to work on my product unless you go and stay in a village." There was a village called Eta that Lever had then adopted, for a minimum of 15 days. And those days, going and living in a village meant that you went to do your nature's job in the field. There was no hotel, you stayed in a farmer's house and you ate what they ate. There was no restaurant, or there was no bottled water you would take with you, etc. Those 15 days connected me. I later on launched Linterland, which was a rural marketing company in Lintast, and I've done a lot of rural related work in my company as well. I think those 15 days taught me much more than my MBA did, and 30 years of working in Bombay did in that bit. So you must learn how to connect with the consumer, which is true in COVID times, pre-COVID times, whatever. But I think those are some very valuable lessons one learned.
Right. So I think your story is fabulous, because you're talking about empathy, you're talking about, human centricity, You're talking about listening, you're talking about vulnerability, you're talking about the ability or the courage to work with your vulnerability to be able to actually get in touch with authentic information before you make your decisions. So I think you said a lot of things in your story. Daryl, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I wanted to add something. Well, Ashish, I totally agree with what you just said. I mean, given in this kind of times where our former precedences and processes don't really help us out, when we fall back into our natural way of doing things, like you rightfully mentioned, the rural people are a lot more ready to take on the change because they have always been founded on very, very fundamental and very human-centered values and principles in working with each other. And I think that's really key in this kind of times. And for all you know, they might be the ones that come out victorious first with new business models, new ways of living their lives, within the villages. And that's something that I've seen myself as well firsthand. Just exactly a year ago, where I was also in a part of Myanmar, where we went over to a UNESCO heritage site to learn about a very traditional business. But it is not simply about the business process that really stood out. It was the ability and the mindset that the people had in working with each other. You didn't get that whole paradigm of power, but you got a lot of paradigm of co-creation. And when you're in there, you would realize that there's so many things that you could all do together. So I you know I would love to visit. I mean, that village that you have been in, to see what's really happening today. I think there is a lot of insights that we can get.
It will be very different, that I can guarantee you. But it's not just in India. I got into Vietnam maybe 5 days or 7 days after Coke was being launched, when the embargo had been lifted. I'm talking about 25 years ago. There used to hardly be any electricity. They were just coming out of a very repressed time when nothing was available, economy was very tight, and so on. Few years later, so you had only bicycles. A few years later, you had only motorbikes. Today, you go to Ho Chi Minh City, it's only cars, and you can't cross it over there. But to talk about co-creation and what and I've worked extensively in Myanmar also. I'm talking about 25 years ago. When there used to be a curfew after 7 p.m. And the army had a complete control. But in time, what happens in places like these, Vietnam is the best place to get your mobile phone repaired, or your old watch repaired, or your camera repaired, or anything else repaired, because if it can't be repaired anywhere else, they will be able to repair it. And you know what's the reason? They were shut out from the world for so long that whatever they had in. So I went, let's say in early 90s, late 80s or early 90s, whenever I went there, they still had French cars which were left from the 50s and 60s. By the time, everything had changed except the outside of the car, but they had learned how to make it go, right? And that's what they're really, really good at, because they've learned through these periods of hardship. So I think one of the lessons that you have to always make sure is to stay connected to the roots. Natural communities pick up certain strengths, and communities that have gone through greater amount of adversity, I think, actually cope with adversity much better, because it's there in their muscle memory. They know how to live with lesser resources, and how to what should I say, how to maximize the resources that they have. So therefore, the example of Myanmar that you're giving, or Vietnam that I'm giving, or rural India, it all falls in play. And in some ways, COVID is teaching us that you need very few things in life to survive, but
Yeah.
you need to be very sharp and smart to be able to thrive.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that, on that note of having called out vulnerability in so many of these stories, I'm going to take an audience poll here. So, Sunit, can you have the audience poll up? I'm going to ask another question here, and let's get the audience in. And I will call out some of the audience comments here as well. And we do have some questions which we'll take after this. So, my question to the audience is, co-creating or open sourced innovation requires exposing your vulnerabilities to customers or to employees, which prevent most leaders from using this route to solve problems. Do you agree or do you disagree? Yes or no? Do you believe co-creating or open source innovation requires exposing your vulnerabilities to the customer or to employees, which prevent leaders from using this route to solve problems? What we're asking is that because you don't want to expose your vulnerabilities, especially to your um, to your audiences, whether it's customer or employee, you'd rather not use the co-creation route? This is a bit of an extension of our first question, but give us your response on that. Yes, no, 30 seconds to respond. And I think with that, can you publish the response, Suneet? All right. So, we're clearly talking about fixed mindsets here, not wanting to see yourself get it wrong, wanting to look right all the time, would rather not go in search of a new solution than to be able to be seen as somebody who doesn't know or doesn't have all the answers. So, huge opportunities there that we're losing out on by being able to not use this route to be able to especially solve new problems. I think at this stage, I'm going to turn over to Richard, but Richard, I'm going to do that by being able to get you all to be able to answer some of the audience questions.
Sure.
So we have Prasanna Rao here, and he's, I do know Prasanna, and hi Prasanna, and thanks for joining in. He says, where there is a doubt on the need of co-creation and centralized power making is a barrier, what is your take on the need for enhanced accountability and ownership on those who do get an opportunity to be involved in decision making?
Okay. So I think if you ask me today, in today's time, I think co-creation has become something that one needs to go into. I mean, it's just survival. Forget about anything else today, in today's time. So leaders who have been blocking it, if they are doing well, fine, they can pass on for some more time. But as we go into, in today's, I can give you an example in consulting, for example. If we did not pivot to the technology era, I think most consulting firms, I'm talking the big four, would have been dead. And I think leaders need to, and we're not all technology experts, but we needed to hire that kind of talent and get it. So I think the centralized control time is, in my view, it's moving away. There would be, like what Ashish said, that when you run global organizations, you need certain processes which need to be controlled centrally, and which you need when you run global organizations. But most organizations now have local flavors. They have a global kind of this thing. So I think it's important that there is empowerment done. Empowerment does if you are secure. When will you empower? When you're secure. If you're not secure, you will never empower, because you're always scared about, that you will be exposed, or this other guy will be looked at as a better leader. And I think we're all fighting for our own positions. And that is what is actually stopping a lot of these egos, I would say, of some of the managers who are involved in these kind of decision makings. So I think it's time when organizations actually encourage employees to come and talk, employees to come and give their points of view and come out with solutions which are important for solving client-related problems, or depends which kind of, I'm talking client because I'm from a consulting, so we basically create solutions for clients. Or what is a better way to do it, and that can only come from youngsters. At least from my own experience, the more I involve the younger people into coming up with ideas, I think the firm benefited, because these people brought out many more ideas than what their, and we used to have competitions actually, and we would reward those ideas which would be commercially viable to youngsters, not only get acknowledged, but they would also get special bonuses, etc. So I think it is about how do you create an environment of trust? How do you create an environment where you get it done? And this can be done through a good performance management system. That's the best way to do it. How do you reward such behavior? There could be affirmative action and there could be other action. I think affirmative always works better. And I think that is the kind of way to answer Prasanna. I don't know whether, Prasanna, I've answered your question, but I think the performance management system would be a good way to reward people for their behavior.
Right.
I'm just giving you a small example today, Prasanna, Sujaya, is we are doing an integration of two organizations of KPMG in the Middle East, that is the Dubai firm and the Lower Gulf firm and the Saudi firm. And we are now putting a system in place where the partners will be incentivized for showing collaborative behavior. We are putting performance indexes there that if you show collaborative behavior, winning in each other's markets as the firms integrate, you will be incentivized through earning more money. So I think creating a positive environment of saying, how do you actually collaborate and win? So I think that could be one way of doing it.
Right.
I
Yes,
Dr.
Daryl.
Sujan,
Yeah.
if I could, because this is really very interesting, how might we be able to introduce indicators of performance in co-creation? This is something that's really interesting for me. Richard, if you could share a bit more, how would you measure co-creation and the levels of co-creation in organizations? What would some of these possible indicators be like?
So it would be what were the new ideas that came out? So, people coming and contributing to new ideas. Secondly, first of all, the organization needs to give time and space to people, because some of these ideas can fail. And we should not go after people who fail, because I'm not saying you go overtly and applaud failures, but I think in failures, that's learnings also. So I think the point is, because you can take it to the next level. So I would say, who's the person who's brought in the maximum number of ideas? Which ideas actually got commercialized? Because ideas can come, but some of the ideas may not be practical to commercialize it. So the way we used to work in the India firm was, we used to take those ideas, give it to a team of people along with the person who brought the idea, and work to a solution which we could then take to our clients. So that's one way of doing it. Or if I take a Singapore firm example, they had created a digital village. They got the entire office building, and they took one floor and made it into a digital village where people would come in t-shirts and jeans, very different from a KPMG partner or employee. And but they would work on problem solutions different industry sectors would face, and they would sit and try and find solutions around it. Now, these people would get rewarded on the basis of the new solutions they would bring. And those solutions then would be taken by the client partner to his clients and sell it out there. But their job was to actually create those solutions which they would take forward. So I think the reward comes from the ideas generated, the number of ideas generated, and the number of ideas that can be commercialized, irrespective whether they failed or succeeded. Because I think you need to encourage people to come. Otherwise, people have fear, okay, this will fail, then what happens? So I think that's, and then most important, I think we need to give them time and space. Very important.
So, I don't know, I'm just going to butt in, my background's HR and talent and, culture and the rest of that. And, I would worry about having these kind of schemes, frankly, because, what we're actually looking for, and it may be specific to certain projects that you're driving, Richard, so I'm not refuting that. I'm just saying in our conversation around co-creation, we're talking about mindsets of being able to involve voice. We're talking about mindsets which reek of equality in terms of the fact that your great ideas can come from anywhere. So do you create enough space for divergent thinking before converging to what you believe is the solution? Also, do you believe that the best ideas could actually come from people who are closest to a problem? Also, it's a mindset to be able to widen up the horizon, to be able to say that, we could get this from anywhere, and that, there is a lot of ingenuity and creativity that people have. We got to be able to create platforms to be able to harness that creativity and the ingenuity, because what's going to come out of that, what's going to come out of we is much better than what comes out of me. And I think that's the mindset that we're actually looking at with co-creation. I think that, if early in the game we have incentives for giving a great idea, not giving a great idea, I think in most organizations we're still at a stage where we don't have enough platforms to encourage the ideas, or we have tokenism or lip service in terms of being able to attract ideas. Let me give you an example. And I think because we've been talking about work from home and the rest of that, and I want to be able to assure the audience that we are going to take your questions. I just wanted to respond to the conversation Daryl and Richard just had right now. So for most organizations, this work from home, especially for organizations that have risk and control right at the center of their persona, work from home has been blasphemous idea, has been an unacceptable idea for the longest time. And there's some absolutely amazing stories of, how many times, various teams, various employee resource groups have put forward the need for either flexible working or working from home, which has been shot down, saying not for our industry, not for our business. Suddenly a lockdown happens and all of that changes, and everyone's got their back against the wall, and they've now figured that there is a more efficient way of doing this. This is possible. You can mobilize large numbers of people to work from home. Maybe inconvenient for many, but you can actually get this done when you want to be able to get work from home, that you can be productive by working from home, that you actually can get people to be able to contribute well when they work from home. And whether there is a fair amount of longer hours and the rest, I think some of that has also come from not knowing how to work or how to collaborate from working from home. And I know that in large pockets, there's huge fatigue because, you're doing something extremely unnatural in the last 6 months, which is expecting large numbers of people to do all kinds of things from home, take care of their children from home and take care of their parents from home, and look after the home and also look after your work from home. And I think that's a lot to demand from people. And there are, there are invariable breakdowns in terms of, mental health issues and other kinds of issues, loss of productivity issues, because they're just fatigued and tired with it. So much as you can sing hosannas on how great this has been, I think the fact that, a lot of organizations believe it's not sustainable, even if they've been indefinitely put on work from home kind of situations. So I think there's been enough talk on that to say it's going to be hybrid eventually or whatever. But I think what's interesting is what's come out of this work from home in terms of the sheer opportunities for co-creation in terms of involving talent. And I'm going to bring that perspective in because we did talk about, the market and about customers. And I'm going to now try and talk a bit about talent. And so I think that in some organizations, there's been an ask, for example, should we be giving our employees COVID leave? Right? So when they do get COVID, how do we act around that? Is there an opportunity to be able to give people a break because they've been doing very long hours over a long period of time, which is, can we give them additional break, which is like a refresh and rejuvenate kind of 3 days, where someone who's now having breakdowns and is not doing so well, in an offline conversation, the manager has the power to be able to say, it's all right, you don't log in for the next 2 or 3 days. I think you ought to rest. So I'm just saying these are policies or these are programs which organizations have traditionally not had, simply because we've not been in this kind of a situation before. And what I find is that we still have traditional orientations towards the decision making. So the decision making process is that the suggestions will come, they will get escalated to the top leadership or the top leadership team, who will quickly, very quickly, immediately shoot it down, because there are huge cost implications of giving anything like that to, or offering anything like that to organizations, especially if they're large and they have large numbers of people. Now, this is the way we made decisions in the pre-COVID times, which is we had the luxury of, like Ashish was saying, you kind of, you escalate things upwards and then you wait for somebody to approve a scheme. If you're international, it will go to Asia Pac, then Asia Pac will send it somewhere else and then somebody else will approve the scheme. And in most cases will shoot down an idea of this kind. I think that the real power of co-creation is to be able to believe in the wisdom of people, not just in the creativity of people, but in the sheer wisdom of people. And let me explain what I mean by that. Is that if you actually create a committee of employees or talent and your leadership together, and maybe you have a fair amount of representation across the organization, you ask them to be able to figure that we have been receiving some requests for, let's say, leave around this very unprecedented, challenging times, that they want this as a special leave to be able to get approved. What is it that we can do to be able to, actually go back to the management with a recommendation that is feasible? And you'll be surprised, and I'm saying pleasantly surprised, that when they go through the math or they understand what the implications might be, you will come in, they'll either come back with a solution that's feasible, or they themselves will understand that the organization at this time cannot afford a cost of this kind. And therefore, this is an unfair ask of the management at this point in time, given the way we may be poised. What I miss is this belief in the wisdom, in the collective wisdom of people. And I think there is a fear the minute that the reins are passed on to be able to get shared with a group of people, is that you'll now be overpowered, that your perspective or your point of view will not be respected anymore, and that there will be now groupism which will be against your point of view, and you're going to be up against that, which is going to debilitate your relationship with employees. And I think I want to be able to invite another perspective here, which is you can actually come closer, create relationships, human-centric relationships of wisdom with your employees. Employees are not unreasonable groups of people. They want the organization to sustain. They want the organization to succeed. If the ask is unreasonable, they will tell you that that's unreasonable, but they arrived at that decision together with you. And now you have a very powerful solution, which perhaps comes closer to what it is that everyone wants. There's no disenchantment, there's no disengagement. I'm always amazed that we don't involve people and then we want to measure how engaged they're really feeling, because we're not creating enough platforms for contribution, and then we're trying to measure whether they feel inspired. And just imagine the environment we're in right now with people working from home. How inspired can you really be to make involuntary contributions? And despite that, organizations regale you with stories of involuntary contributions that people are constantly making out of homes which are uncomfortable, which may not have consistent connectivity, that do not have people to be able to support them. They have no house help at home. There are instances, I'm told, where people don't switch on their videos because they don't have a backdrop or an environment which is worth showing, and they're embarrassed with that, and so they don't want to switch on their videos. We're talking about situations such as these, and therefore the need for empathy and to be able to count on the wisdom and maturity of our people. I want to be able to give another example. There was an instance where one of the companies that I was working with had a situation where, their IJP, had kind of broken down over a period of time because they'd stopped hiring over an extended period of time. They were going through like a lull, and they decided freeze on hiring, no hiring for 6 months. So somebody asked the CHRO that, what happened to that IJP business? Because they used to really, really publicize the IJP platform at one time. And he said, what happened to that? He said, why? He said, actually, I had a couple of opportunities within my team, but I understand your IJP doesn't work anymore. He said, no, of course it works. It's there. But what do you want? Because we're not hiring from outside anymore. So we can figure what it is that you might really need. And he came back telling his people that, I'm getting questions from people who think the IGP platform doesn't exist anymore. I think we just stopped it we just let it peter off. And this is something that, I must say that the HR community is notorious for, which is to start initiatives with big bang, and then they just peter off and nobody knows what happens to them, and they just disappear over a period of time. So interestingly, IJP, however, in most organizations kind of sustains because you want talent from inside, or you want to cross-pollinate, whatever that might be. Now that IJP had died out over a period of time. So they decided that let's go around, and this was for the first time that they were ever going to do it, right? Let's go around asking people who are users of the IJP, which are department heads and HODs and what have you. Let's ask them, what do you think about this platform, because we're not using it anymore, because we're not hiring. Is there anything else that you require around this for which we can actually use the IGP? And here's what came out. When they got talking to their customers inside the organization, what they figured was that there weren't requirements which were permanent, but there were lots of requirements which were short term. So for example, the accounting team has a peak season during the year where they would do with some more help inside the organization. So are there people who are on the bench? They could easily come and help us. And we'll also have great knowledge management, because now there'll be a group of people who know how to do accounting inside the organization as well. And similarly, these requirements came up from across the organization, and they redefined their IGP as full-time jobs and stints, which is essentially like gig inside your organization. And this came out simply because they co-created the solution by talking to their customers for the very first time. The first time they created the IGP, it was because it was a board decision to create an IGP. So the point I'm trying to make here is the minute you talk to people, you can get like a variation that is more useful for where it is that you're actually sort of poised. And so co-creation is just ever so powerful, even in the talent domain. And I think that's what I wanted to kind of bring forth, sort of to the conversation. I don't know, any reactions from any of you on this? Darryl?
Not really. It's quite a contextual argument, and I'm not too sure, frankly, myself, what is the IGP or the IJP. I was trying to
the internal job posting portal.
Internal job posting.
Posting portal. Yes. Okay. All right. It's very commonly used acronym in India, so I just usually use it. We have some questions here. Ashish, I'm going to take a question for you. This is a question saying our producers have to develop appropriate products and services for tier 2, 3 and rural sectors. Let our creativity work, and we should be able to create millions of jobs in these sectors. What's your view on this?
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, I think there's a gold mine lying there, and I'm not the first one to be saying it. I'm bottom of the pyramid, and we've had all of those things coming in. I'm not necessarily convinced that you need to customize products specifically. I mean, that way you need to customize a product for everybody, even for urban rich, urban poor, rural, etc. For everything. But I think you've got to first start getting the insights to the rural consumer. There are in the last maybe let's say 5 or 7 years, about 100 million Indians or 150 million Indians have come into the consuming class, right? They've come out of poverty into the consuming class. The good news is, I mean, obviously COVID is a setback, but if everything gets back to normal and things start working well, another 200 million Indians are going to come out of the poverty line and come into the consuming class. So there's a huge potential lying over there. Let me give you some more statistics. Today, about 450 million Indians are reached by internet, and we're already amongst the largest consumers of internet in the world. But that's not interesting to me. What's more interesting to me is that our studies show that in the next 2 years, we're going to have something like another 250 million internet users coming in. Now, they will all be coming in through mobile. Almost 98, 99% are coming in through mobile. And these people are not going to be coming from Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, Madras. They're going to be coming from smaller towns. They're going to be coming from rural areas, etc. And therefore, the whole creation of content, the creation of products, etc., will also have to be in local languages with a vernacular. We've been creating advertising in South Bombay and South Delhi and then translating it for the last 100 years, right? That can't work. That's not, you've got to create it in the local idiom. Something like Pujo, which you know, will work very differently with a Bengali lady in a village than it would be in a, with a Bengali copywriter sitting in Chitranjan Park trying to create it for them. So I think we need to get to the absolute sort of insights from the ground, and not only create product. I mean, because you can't endlessly create products, I mean, customize products to an extent, but also to create communication that works for them. And all of this has to emanate from insights. And the one thing that will change going forward is going to be data. I mean, we're all talking about, as consumers, we're leaving a huge footprint, a digital footprint in everything we do. With what we buy, what we see through your mobile phone, you can make out where you are, what you've been doing, etc. We're all talking about big data. I don't think any company has really figured out how to really analyze and use it to the best of your ability. And when you're talking about a few 100 million people, nothing like having great data to show you what those insights could be, so that bucket segments, clusters can be created, which are also profitable for companies to create products for. So I think that is definitely going to be the way forward.
Right. I'm going to bring forth this question, which is very interesting. I mean, anybody can go to be able to answer it. It's Jitin Handa, and he's asking, how does the current spike in need for co-creation, and talent coverage, how does this work? He's asking first at the C level to understand and spearhead this evolution into the fabric of their companies. Next, how to make it trickle down the organization. Example, entrepreneurship, and this is to Ashish's point. Entrepreneurship has been around for a while. It still has minimal traction across most industries and companies. Also, what does HR need to do to make this a systemic human asset? I think he's asking a couple of questions here. Ashish, you want to be able to respond to this one, which is to do with...
I'll take the last part of the question first. HR first has to be scrapped and rebuilt from with a very different perspective, right?
Wow.
Design
HR theories, all, and I'm sorry to say this, but this is true for other parts of the business as well. All our HR theories are 50 years out of date. Okay, they've been contemporized and very nice models made and so on and so forth. Today, you need as many HR solutions as there are employees, right? How do you do that in an environment where you need to keep some sort of a semblance, some sort of a parity, some sort of, we've all grown up with, knowing job classes and levels and this and that. So yes, you do need to keep some order, but I am no longer as an employee willing to be fit in one slot, because my needs are very different, and HR, I'm afraid, in no company has a solution to that problem. Correct? If you're talking about creating entrepreneurs, you cannot box entrepreneurs into an Excel sheet grid and say you are grade 6, level 4, Z axis, so and so, and then say, oh, why aren't you performing like an entrepreneur? Where is your creativity? Where are your ideas coming from? Of course, they will not come. So I think the one part of I come from a people's business, and the one part of our business that needs total reinvention in HR And I'm happy that my company is doing some efforts in that. A lot of way to go. We have to rethink employee first, and HR will flow from there, right?
So,
Uh,
I think Ashish, to his point on entrepreneurship, I think if I keep specifically to the question he's asking, then my response to Jitin is that, why is entrepreneurship the responsibility of HR? I mean, I think the question itself is flawed, because this needs to emanate from the type of leadership that exists within organizations. When Ashish spoke about entrepreneurship being encouraged inside organizations, he's talking about a culture that encourages this kind of behavior. This does not get governed by policies or with people who come in to be able to enable. They can help you get those kind of people on board once you've defined this is the kind of people we want to be able to bring in within the organization. But it's got to be co-created again in terms of what kind of people would demonstrate or manifest entrepreneurship inside the organization. I think we've burdened HR with too much more than what it is that they're expected to do. They need to reinvent themselves, and I think they're attempting as a community to be able to reinvent and become more futuristic. But I think what's very important is to not put everything at HR's threshold. I think we're overburdening and over-expecting. All kinds of leadership responsibilities seem to have transitioned to HR. So there are individuals who are leading organizations. There's a CEO and a CXO team that's leading an organization. If you want a culture of entrepreneurship, it needs to be co-created by everyone inside the organization to be able to enable this to happen. So I just wanted to add that to what it is that Ashish was already sort of.
I think, Sujaya, that sounds very defensive, as you say it. The HR head of a company is the CEO. There's no.
That's right, and I agree with that. And that's why I'm saying that.
That's where it's got to emanate.
It needs to be co-created.
Thing, I know this is not a debate about HR, but I'll give you my point of view. Nevertheless, I think the big thing that needs to happen is that all these years our focus on HR has been more operational, right? How to keep the machine moving in a sense. I think we now need to make HR a lot more strategic, and that in itself will bring in employee customization. We need to get away from one shoe fits all kind of HR mentalities and find ways that how in a practical way can you have 1,000 shoes to fit 1,000 people.
Yes, and I'm saying that, having said that, I'm just going to repeat that the responsibility to build entrepreneurship inside an organization does not belong to any one function. Yeah, that's the point I'm making. All right, let's go forward. And I think we need to have, we have a couple of questions here. I think there's Prasanna saying, thanks, Richard, you did answer my question. But in a consultancy, the mindset of employees is solution oriented, but in manufacturing organizations, the challenge is different. As an ex-Leverite, I could relate to what Ashish said, but Ashish, will you agree, even in a progressive organization like HLL, where entrepreneurship was encouraged, involvement, co-creation, etc., did not happen easily? This is just a comment. We're going to leave that be. Much has evolved. I think everyone's worked for levers many years ago, so I'm sure much has evolved in the interim, and we'll try and make that, stay that as it is. Praveen Sinha here saying co-creation will need interactive technologies to enable stakeholders to interact directly with one another. Do we have advanced technologies available in India to take co-creation to the next level? Richard, do you want to respond to this?
So, see, technology is going to play a very important role in whatever you do. Let's first understand, technologies become pervasive. Artificial intelligence, Internet of Things has come and taken over our lives. In fact, it's because of technology we are doing this conference, this webinar also today. If we didn't have this, we would have not been able to imagine doing Singapore, India connected, or all the cities of India connected. One would not have done it. I think the important point is that the whole thing of co-creation is a mindset. It's a mindset of bringing different people together. That is your customers, your vendors, the experts, the senior management of the company. You name it, and all those people need to come together to create what is the solution that is required, and customer has to be at the center. See, because today, what are you creating? And I like what Ashish said, that when he said about the employees, I mean HR, I'll just give you a small example. I just slightly deviate before I answer this, is what we did in our organization was we took a consulting partner and made her the head of HR. We took a line partner, high performing line partner, and made her the head of HR. I'm not saying anything against the HR community, but I think HR needs to evolve, needs to become part of the organization needs to understand the vision of the organization and should work towards that vision. So I'll just leave it at that. But even when we're talking of co-creation, I think it is nothing to do with HR here. It is to do with the senior leadership of the company. What is that space they create for people to actually do this co-creation? And how are they going to look at all what actually gets done there? Because if people come together, I think, and diversity is very important. And I'm not talking of gender diversity, I'm talking of diversity of thought. Because what we all end up doing, we end up hiring our clones, people who look like us, feel like us, and talk like us. We need diverse people to come together on a platform to build a new solution that is required, whether it's a new product or it's a new service. And we have not spoken, but an experience. I mean, what about the experience that you want to give the customer? Because a delighted customer, I mean, I'll just give one example of Apple. They brought the iPad. Nobody asked for an iPad. They brought it because they knew that the customer would require an iPad is thriving, and people joked, laughed at it and said iPad will fail, etc. So I think one should also understand what the customer actually wants and be able to build it. So I think customer centricity has to be at the center of it all. And then you put your product innovation, service innovation, everything can be built around it. And then you need to give the customer, because once you give a customer what he wants, then you're not doing customer test. You know, earlier you will have a new product, you would go and test it in a market. And I know in India, at least you are testing it in Bangalore, Hyderabad, as a test market. Today, you're building it with the customer.
Yes.
And once you're building it with the customer, then you don't need to test it with the customer because the customer himself is involved into it. So I think there needs to be a lot of input being taken, I would say crowdsourcing of ideas from different users will actually, and I think Unilever has been on top of it, P&G has been there, and a few other companies which have actually been doing that and getting ideas of saying, how do we actually build the thing for customers? So I think technology is going to play a very important part, because you've got so many simulations, etc. you need to do. It will give you the results. And also, Ashish did speak about big data, but I'm wondering whether big data is not dead. Because post-COVID, I wonder what data is going to actually work, because the entire consumer preferences, of course, he's a bigger expert. He's the ad guy, he knows, media guy, but I think the data which we collect now is going to be very different consumer preferences to what we have collected over the last so many years. Yes. I just thought I'd leave this one point for everyone to think about, whether there's going to be small data is going to take over or a new data is going to take over. But because all the data you had of a customer is no more there. I mean, we can take about ourselves, look at our own consumer spending that's happened over those last 4-5 months. Yes. I think minimalist has become the order of the day in my view.
Yes. So I'm just doing a quick time check. We're actually already at 5:30. And, I thought we'll kind of end with an audience poll, right? I think we've got all our inputs in. But before that, I'm just going to take one comment from Swati Sinha, who's saying, what are the perils of co-creation? Do you think that the new generation is already in co-creation mode, like gig economy with less power, more autonomy? Is this going to be the way work will get done? Then organizations will have to change the way they are getting things done. And I think that's a brilliant note on which to be able to kind of, end this conversation, but not without the audience poll. So I'm going to request Suneet to be able to have the last audience question up. And hopefully we'll try and see what it is that everyone believes. How are we poised at the end of a 90-minute conversation around co-creation? You've had some veteran experts talk to you today. And of course, Daryl, my partner from Design Thinkers Academy. Here's your last question. COVID-19 times have created more openness among leaders to explore and involve customers and employees to participate with their ingenuity to deliver new solutions. Do you believe in COVID-19 times you're seeing more acceptance of vulnerability? Are you seeing the needle move on this? Do you think they're more open to involve employees? Are they still open to involve customers? If you agree, yes. If you don't agree, no. It will give us a check on the quantum of work that still remains to be done in this space. So do be honest as you respond to this. COVID-19 times have created more openness among leaders to explore and involve customers and employees to participate with their ingenuity to deliver new solutions. Can you post the responses, Suneet? Okay, all right. You do believe that there is more openness, at least it's beginning to happen with COVID-19. We still have a very significantly long way to go. And, hopefully there are lots of reports from the ground level on distributed authority, on trying to groom talent. Some of my clients are doing this, which is to be able to mentor people who are closest to challenges and are doing a great job during the COVID-19 time, so that a lot of organizations have gone back to the drawing board to be able to redefine who their high potential employees really are. And I think great times to go back to the drawing board to redefine leadership as well, and also culture building inside organizations. These times are going to be here to stay. We still don't have the vaccine, and what is the use of an adversity if we don't really kind of meaningfully utilize this to be able to revamp, redefine, rejuvenate, so that we can reset.